It is quite late already. I don't think we're going to go super long today. But there was this monstrosity that I wanted to look at briefly. A debate between, is it between Hands of Harker and Perspective Philosophy, or one of these three guys is modding, and two of them are debating. One of them is Lewis on the left. And the debate concerns whether murderers should die in prison. Debating rehabilitation versus retribution. Now, this is very strange, because the question is not, should murderers not be executed? The question is, should murderers die in prison? And so it's not a choice between execution and staying execution for some reason, noble or otherwise. It's literally just, should we kill them efficiently or very, very, very slowly? This is a take that Lewis has been, I guess it's not surprising at this stage, but this is a take that Lewis seems to have been doubling down on since the debate and leading up to it. And I suppose it's a bit odd, because you tend to think of, like, veganism, especially ethical veganism, and there's a difference. There are people who are vegan for dietary or class reasons or whatever. Sometimes they're just disgusted by the concept of eating animal products. That's a thing. I mean, I'm disgusted by certain animal products. Ever since The Boys Season 2, I have not consumed a drop of pure, like, plain milk product. Milk, not milk product. But, you know, you tend to think of it as being, like, motivated by compassion for animals, right? You're concerned about, you know, not causing living things undue suffering. But then you see people like Lewis, with their abundance of compassion for non-human animals, suddenly direct their attention towards human animals, and there's no mercy. There is no consideration whatsoever. There is the utmost contempt for anyone who doesn't meet... It's almost classist, isn't it? But meet some sort of aesthetic slash... I don't want to say, like, philosophical standard, because the philosophical standards here are near the Earth's core, but some, like, superficial semblance to that. And they'll go after their troubles with addiction, they'll go after their family troubles, they'll go after... Not all, but I see a lot of it. And it kind of makes me wonder a little bit. People like Lewis like to talk a lot about how much they care about animals and animal suffering, but I don't think they really mean it a whole lot. Because humans are animals too. And once we turn our attention to, you know, icky human beings with which we can't have this sort of abstract compassion for because they're particular and they have histories that we associate with, that we find gross or repulsive, you know, all compassion goes out the window. Anyways, enough blabbing. Let's actually watch this thing. I don't think we'll go through the whole thing. Well, we'll see. It's an hour and 43 minutes long. If they go really slow, I might zap it forward. I believe it actually ends considerably earlier than that. Yeah, so it only goes for about an hour. So maybe we'll go through the whole thing. Let me just get the audio here, because it's always so much quieter on stuff that I need heard for some reason. We good? We ready to roll? Alright, let's do it.
What we're talking about is allocating resources. How best to allocate resources to make the greatest happiness for everybody.
Yeah,
right?
Well, no, that's utilitarian, and this is what I was expecting, just essentially liberal utilitarianism. Essentially, you're presupposing a justice, which is just the greatest good for the greatest number. And I ask you what the greatest good is,
I
want
to help people, right?
Here, let me just adjust this audio a little bit more. I think I see what's happened. So, we're gonna... Why is it at 61%? What the hell? Okay, so we'll go at 100%. Oh, man. This is what I get for taking a break. Okay, let's see how loud this is.
and then you say
again,
harm.
I don't really care. I don't really care about
no,
these
but
sort of, like, abstract ideas.
No, actually, there is a purpose, and that's justice. And you say it's an abstract ideal, but I think that's absolutely vile that you would violate somebody's human rights, and you'd violate them for what? For some abstract notion of the public good. What would you imprison certain statistically prevalent groups who would commit crime? Would you prevent people from being of certain religions if they're associated with certain crimes? It's absolutely disgusting that you would even consider that punishment should be done for any other means than righting a wrong. This is why utilitarianism
is wrong. We can't right what's wrong.
That's a little strange. I suppose I should like clarify for my own position going into this. And by the way, like I'm not hard on this whatsoever. I have no particular love of the death penalty or of capital punishment generally. I perceive that there are significant harms that accrue through long-term imprisonment on multiple angles that make it a less humane alternative than it is often considered. I think it's only by comparison to the barbarity of sticking a needle into someone and poisoning them to death in front of an audience without even the decency to, like, you know, actually have somebody responsible for doing it. There's a distance between the act where it's proceduralized and just very disturbing, where we don't feel the weight of it. Like that contrast tends to make like prison and like, you know, at least they're alive, and you sort of like hold out hope that maybe someday they'll get out, things like that. And in some cases that's true. But I am very skeptical of the idea that imprisonment is simply a more humane alternative. And there are other issues as well. There are rare cases, and they should be treated as exceptions, I think, where you have exceptionally violent individuals who we can't reasonably rehabilitate, who we're basically locked into a choice between either basically destroying the person's body and soul by doing something to reprogram them or hijack them, if you will, assuming that's possible, and maybe that's the preferable option, or putting them into a box for the rest of their lives so they can never really live, and keeping them effectively as an animal in a zoo, or allowing them to do nothing but cause harm wherever they may find an opportunity for the rest of their lives, or whatever. I think that was the prison one. I think we can. I'm so tired. We'll just mix those two together. What was I saying? Right. So between that and, you know, just doing the thing that ceases the further accrual of harm. Yeah? Not my preference, but it seems to me that there's an argument for that. My concern is primarily with figuring out a way to mitigate or stop those things. I don't think that's what we're going to see here. I think what we're going to see here is an argument between someone who's going to say just pure rehabilitation, which, if it's feasible, yeah, sure. I don't like how there's a tendency to downplay the importance of justice, because I think it is important. And I can't help but notice, and this is going to be more a biographical statement than a factual one, most people I have seen who take that hard stance on pro-rehabilitation tend to be extremely cruel in other ways that suggest that they're insensitive to the suffering of families of victims, say, of murder, for reasons that should make us squint a little bit. Not that in itself is sufficient to argue for the death penalty per se, but, you know, it's just something I notice. So we're going to see someone take that position. I'm not assuming Hans of Harkir is like this. It's just a thing that I've noted. Hans of Harkir, I take it, is going to be taking the rehabilitation position. Now, I noticed Lewis here has phrased it as debating rehabilitation versus retribution. So Lewis is going to be arguing for retributive justice, specifically for the use, I would assume, of execution for retribution. That's interesting. That's very interesting. We'll see if he actually does that. But I would have thought he would have taken a softer position than me. I seem positively kosher by comparison, if that is indeed his stance, that murderers should just be killed. Is that what we're gonna? That was my impression from what he said on Twitter. So we'll see. Liquid sanity.
You can't write. I don't think
the
you really
only
write.
reason-
But my point is, the point remains that when you want to use prisons as nursing homes, which is in essence what you're advocating for, that is a huge cost to the state, and every one of those dollars, we're not getting anything for any of those dollars.
Okay, we haven't even gotten into it yet. I hate that line of argumentation. Yeah, it's really expensive to the state, but we are specifically talking about how the state handles its citizens, that is, its constitutive parts. It is worth the cost if that's the right decision. Like, that is immaterial. The expense is immaterial there. And furthermore, no state is going bankrupt because of its prison system. That's absolutely ridiculous.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to an episode of Perspective Philosophy. We're having a debate. Should I call you Delaney or Chad, or what would you like to... Chad. And thanks for obviously...
Oh, he's debating Chad, okay, not Hands of Harker.
Sorry, I haven't even really spoke. I've just been in an absolute, kind of...
This is confusing. Why is the moderator on the right side? The moderator should always be centered. Just bad. Unprofessional.
Mess trying to make sure that all the technical difficulties just stop and leave us alone for once. But, yeah. Let's just, I'm happy to get into it, and I'm looking forward to this debate. So yeah, and thank you again to Hans for moderating. I really appreciate it.
This person on Twitch politics.
I don't think anyone could hear you guys. I'm sorry about that.
oh, fuck. All right. Try again. Take it back. Hi, everyone. I'm Hans. I'll be moderating this debate. I won't really be participating. I don't really have a strong opinion on this, so I'm excited to be here. I'm everyone's favorite, extremely nice, extremely non-confrontational Twitch streamer. I'm having a great day, having a great time, and I'm just really excited to be here. So thank you both for accepting me as the mod for this. I'm really excited to put my mod hat back on because I haven't done a lot of moderation for a bit. So, but yeah, all right.
Isn't Hands of Harker the guy who had like the weird neo pronouns takes? I don't know why you'd have strong opinions about that, but not about life and death.
Let's start with Perspective Philosophy. Want to introduce yourself to everybody?
Yeah, so hello, my name is Perspective Philosophy. I study philosophy, or at least I have been studying philosophy doing my PhD on specifically on ethics and animal rights, arguing for a Hegelian approach.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh.
I do streams and talk about ethics and veganism, really. So yeah, that's essentially me.
Hell yeah. All right, Chad.
Hi everyone, I'm Chad, at Chad Not Chad on Twitter. I don't have a sort of practice.
Wait a minute. At Chad Not... Wait. I thought that... Oh my god, I thought that was Chud Logic. I thought Chad Not Chud was Chud Logic for the longest time. Oh dear, I hope I haven't spoken to him as Chud Logic.
This intro, because I'm not a streamer. I just tweet occasionally. But I'm also a PhD student, but not anything that's relevant to this. I've got an interest in politics, got an interest in criminal justice reform in this case. So that's what brought me to this debate. So I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, and the Nordic model. Plug your Nordic model thing.
Oh, right, yeah. So I do run a podcast with a friend of mine named Sid. It's called the Nordic Model. We basically interview people about kind of social democratic socialist type policies. Just recently, we had the chance to interview Matt Brunig, which is very exciting. So check that out in the next couple of weeks. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right. Thank you both so much. All right. So here's the ground rules of the debate. I'm going to try and jump in as little as
These
possible.
are the rules of the
I
duel.
think things are going absolutely off the wall. If I start talking, both of you stop talking. In regards to this, you're both going to get a timed 4-minute intro. I'll give you a sign. I'll be like something like this. I'm like, hey, when you have about a minute left, just to make sure that you know you're on time. So both of you will get an uninterrupted 4-minute intro to lay out your position. You're both big philosophy guys. So I want to make sure you have enough time to be able to adequately explain your position. Then we're gonna do a fun thing afterwards where you both get 3 minutes to, in your best words, describe and steelman your opponent's position, just to make sure that we're all on the same page, that we're not talking past.
Ah, yes, Matt Brunner, the man whose wife called you evil Sunday. Or I called evil. Oh! Oh no. Oh dear. Oh, this is a horribly small world, isn't it?
Ask each other for the purpose of this debate. After that, we'll go into probably about an hour 20, hour 30 of open discussion, followed by probably a 15-minute Q&A with the audiences at the end of the debate.
Honestly, it's probably fine. I doubt he likes her anyways.
Does that sound good?
Yep.
Sounds good to me, yeah.
All right. Which one of you wants to go first?
I'm happy to go first, unless if you want to go first. It's up to you.
You can go ahead if you want to.
Are you sure? Okay, because I guess because I'm defending, the justice of life without parole.
Sure.
So just as to begin the opening statement, I think that the most important.
Okay, so again, like sketchy. Like it seems like it's sort of like humane. Like we're just talking about should murderers ever get out of prison or not? Life without parole, right? Life without parole is a death penalty. You're determining where and how the person will die. I mean, you're not like being the efficient cause of that person's death, but you're basically turning their life off permanently for retributive reasons. I would consider that to be, frankly, one of the most inhumane forms of the death penalty imaginable.
Important thing to begin with is the parameters of this debate, which I think is the philosophy of law, not necessarily an examination of a current criminal justice system. I'm not here to talk about necessarily the inequality and inadequacies of the United Kingdom's or the United States' justice system per se. These contextual applications of life without parole are not necessarily an issue with the sentence itself, but with the justice system and the legality that exists within the state. For example, institutional racism is a problem in the United States. Many people are incarcerated unjustly and given, to be entirely honest with you, far too harsh of a sentence for the crimes that they've committed. I would only argue that life without parole should be given to those who commit murder. And murder I will define in a moment. On top of that, there is also issues in terms of lack of public funding, appropriate facilities, all of these issues, enforcement.
Yeah, that strikes me as strange. I'm not going to pause it like this throughout the whole thing. We'll never get anywhere. But I don't like this characterizing of murder. I mean, keeping in mind, like what he's talking about here when he says murder, he doesn't mean like murder, sort of like sub specie aeternitatis. Like you've done things that have resulted in the unjust deaths of innocent people, and you knew that this would be the case, and you did this for ignoble reasons. Therefore, from the vantage point of absolute justice or whatever, you are a murderer and should be punished as such. He means simply like somebody who finds themselves specifically in a position where they have themselves been the efficient cause of someone's death. They have taken an axe to somebody's neck, therefore they should be in prison without parole. It's tricky because like from a pure like the calculus seems kind of obvious if we're simply talking in terms of like kind of like a break it you buy it mentality, where it's like, well, you killed someone, the only thing that you can give in penance that's equivalent in value to the thing that you destroyed is your own life. So we'll be friendly and we won't kill you, we'll just confine your life to a gray box till the end of time while all of your relationships wither away and you become a shell of yourself before you finally do in fact die anyways. I don't like this because even while he's paying lip service to questions of systemic racism and all these little institutional soft and fuzzy things that result in people being penalized unfairly, he's also allowing something that very much has class and racial elements feeding into it. It's simply the case that somebody will find themselves in a situation where they are either pushed or compelled by something, within reason. Like, I don't think there's ever a case where we're actually compelled to murder. It's sort of baked into the definition of murder. It can't be something that's that has a justifiable cause, right? It's however you define it, it's always going to contain the content unjust killing, unjustified killing. I guess there is a difference between those two. We'll say unjust killing. There are people who are extraordinarily wealthy who will never find themselves in a situation where they have to either kill someone directly themselves or tell somebody else to kill somebody else for them. Through their indifferent action, they can cause the deaths of untold numbers of people. And they know this, and they don't care. But they will never be punished for this. In fact, if they are ever found to have been guilty of something that can reasonably have caused this, or has been determined to have caused this, like, for example, let's pretend for argument's sake that we're pro-life here. The very same day that Jeff Bezos went into space, one of his warehouse employees had a miscarriage. Her baby died because she was not allowed to go on leave. I would consider that, if, for argument's sake, we are being completely non-agnostic about the moral status of fetuses. If we pretend, for argument's sake, that is equivalent to the killing of, through negligent action or whatever, of what we accept as a human life. I don't like the language of personhood here, just because personhood has to do with acceptance into a social order, not with, like, the absolute moral status of human beings in a cosmic sense. But pretending for argument's sake, as many people do, that is the case, I believe Lewis is pro-life, that would count to me as equivalent. And yet, Jeff Bezos will never be punished for this. And if indeed he was punished for it, if there was a way to link someone, not just Bezos specifically, but one person to the negligent actions that resulted in that woman losing her child, the penalty wouldn't even be a question of whether or not this person was guilty of murder. And yet, nonetheless, on a lot of views, including, I suspect, views held by people on this panel, or in this debate, that is indeed what should happen. But we have a strange sensitivity to, the specific action of harming human flesh with a machine directly. And there are reasons for that, of course. Like, it's a different thing to be able to just turn off your brain and forget that the things that you're doing are causing untold amounts of misery to other people, because it's distant. And actually having a human being before you and, breaking them to the point where they cannot function any longer. But I don't think there's morally a significant difference between the two. There are things that make one more disturbing and make us more skeptical of the person's ability to sort of function in a social context. Like, I would probably be more... I would imagine that Jeff Bezos' company has caused more human misery overall than any number of serial killers, but I would certainly feel more comfortable with him at a party than one of those. Nonetheless, we're talking about punishment here. So, long story short, perspective philosophy is very patently allowing, despite, again, the caveats he gives about systemic racism and class and all that stuff, he is allowing those things to bleed through and to influence what is punished and what is not. It's not that simple a question.
These are issues not necessarily with the concept of life without parole, but issues with the state itself. If you were to say, life without parole shouldn't exist because of institutional racism, I will say institutional racism shouldn't exist and life without parole is absolutely fine. So apart from those being tangential to the debate, I think that we should focus on fixing those issues and keep life without parole as a form of punishment.
Okay, so I'm with them right up until that last sentence. I am actually in favor of life without parole for certain cases. I am not in favor of life without parole as a form of punishment. I'm not for it as a form of punishment because it is effectively attempting... It's sort of like God loves his creations too much to annihilate them, so he burns them in hell for all eternity. It's like, we can't bring ourselves to kill you, but we are going to put you in a box and make you suffer until the end of time. The problem is, again, is that these people are still interacting with others. They are still suffering themselves. They are causing other people suffering. They are potentially being absolutely vile in prison. We've seen cases like that. And what is the argument here? Like, just put a stop to it already. Why do you specifically want to keep this person in a box for 80 years? They're not going to live. You are not going to allow that. You're not interested in rehabilitating them. You want them to suffer. You want them to pay for what they've done. Okay. Why? Why? Just end it. Like, what does this do for you? We're not even talking about, like, somebody who's directly related to a victim wanting to avenge that person, right? See, that I would understand. We're talking about proceduralizing this. We can, whether or not we agree with the morality of vengeance as a concept, if somebody has been directly impacted by someone such that they've lost something existentially dear to them, and they take vengeance for that, we're not generally inclined to want to punish that person as if they committed something akin to what that other person did. Our inclination is generally to disapprovingly turn a blind eye, or to be gentle with it. But when we're talking about, like, proceduralizing this, it's the retribution of what? You're just prolonging a thing that you've determined already is too evil to be allowed to live. But you just want it to be in a living death for an extended period of time. Like, to what end? This isn't rational. This is nonsensical. It doesn't even bring any, like, people argue all the time about whether or not the killing of a murderer brings them any sort of solace or closure or whatever. And people are very prone to talking about that in platitudes as if it's simply a done deal. No, it never does. I mean, that's a personality question, right? That depends on who we're talking about. But let's assume that's the case. How does keeping them in a box provide closure to anybody? Again, we aren't giving these people an out. It's specifically life imprisonment without parole. Like, this is effectively kosher torture. This is a very slow, gray, weak kind of torture that we're somehow okay with because nobody at any given point takes a rod and hits the person. Even though, honestly, if you did that 100,000 times and the person had a chance to get out, I'm sure they'd take that deal.
So, past that point, why should we have life without parole? I would say that we should have life without parole or a whole life sentence, as in an individual should be incarcerated until death if they commit murder. And that is only if they commit murder. Any other crime, I do not think, should be given a whole life sentence. I would say it is wholeheartedly unethical because it would require an infinite amount of punishment or an unlimited amount of punishment for a finite amount of crime.
This is silly. Any crime, like especially a lot of white-collar crime, by the way, can result in innocent people's lives being destroyed. Incidentally, it can result in innocent people's lives being destroyed by causing them to fall afoul of the penal system and end up in prison. But among other things, it can cause people to become absolutely materially and emotionally wrecked, often to the point of committing suicide or of falling into habits that destroy them. Or of simply, in the case of a lot of actual places, like actual, as opposed to figurative places, as in the case of like exploited states, frankly, mass starvation, like the Daikon Shield, or what's it called, the Dalkon Shield? I don't remember the time or any of the details, but basically at one point there was an IUD device, I believe, called the I don't think it was the Daikon Shield, it's a type of radish, but the something shield. And it had a design flaw. There was a string that went through it that you used to, like, pull it out or to, like, detect where it was there, because it's, like, you know, put up into the female body's genitalia or whatever. But it had a design flaw. That string went straight through into, I guess, would it be like the cervix or wherever? It went into a place where that string should not go. And that allowed bacteria to climb up. And that caused horrific infections, resulting in birth defects, I believe some deaths. And so it was taken off the market. There was a big scandal. And what did they do with the remaining stock? They sold it to some place in Africa whose name I cannot remember. Or I probably can remember the name, I just can't remember which one it was. And yeah. Like, that nobody responsible for that would have been punished as a murderer, but they should have been. Absolutely. Like, it's not so clear cut as this. Like, people who simply, like, kill someone physically with their bare hands, that does not exhaust the range of people who do this crime of infinite magnitude, if you will. I don't know. I'm setting my expectations too high. Perspective philosophy is a boob.
So the reason I would take, for example, life without parole as qualitatively different to other punishments is because murder is qualitatively different to other crimes. And let me explain. If you have, for example, a crime like theft, theft can be really boiled down to how much it impacts an individual's life, how much value you've taken from the expression of that individual's life. What have you done to that individual in relation to their experiences in the world, their attempts to obtain good within the world? How have you impacted and impeded their moral goals? In the case of in the case of murder, you have eliminated that individual. You have not simply impeded their subjectivity, you've annihilated their subjectivity.
Okay, but consider this. What if, by stealing from that person, you remove their capacity to, say, absorb a shock that ends up killing them? Or ends up killing someone they love and they can't recover from that shock? Like, what if suddenly, because you've stolen from somebody, and we can be liberal with what we mean by stealing, somebody finds themselves unable to satisfy the basic conditions of life. Or they find themselves in such dire straits that their health deteriorates, or their family life deteriorates, and somebody dies from that. Like, this is so just two-dimensional. Like, you think like a Hegelian would be onto this, right? But
it is infinitely more weighty than any other crime, for the fact that no amount of restitution can undo the death of the victim.
I hate this. I hate this characterization of murder as specifically different because you can't undo it. Okay, I've got a black pill for you, okay? So just buckle up. You can't undo anything. Here's a list of all the things you can undo. There is nothing that you can undo. You put somebody into prison for 50 years, and you find out after 50 years that they were wrongfully imprisoned. You can't undo that. You letting them out does not undo that. That's a good thing if you let them out after finding that out, but you haven't undone jack. That is done. You steal from somebody, that is done. Maybe you can make it better after the fact. You can't undo it. There is no undoing things in this world, my friend.
Victim has no chance of obtaining a life free of the pain and suffering that you've caused. They are essentially gone, and there is no ability to restore those individuals to life. So they cannot be qualitatively the same. You can give, people that money back. You cannot give them their life back. You can give people that freedom back, and you can give them a value which is akin or qualitatively or quantitatively.
Okay, like, think about this. What was that? Who was that guy? He was wrongfully imprisoned. I think he was like a boxer or something. There was a movie about him. It was with Denzel Washington. There's a famous clip where he's like, "I've been locked up here for 30 years." His wife's left him. His family's forgotten him. Like, everyone's moved on, and then they find out after the fact that he was framed. or that he was falsely accused for whatever. Was it called like the tornado or something? The hurricane? You cannot restore that man's life to him. It is simply the case that once you let him go, he still has life left. That is all that means. And does this suddenly sanitize killing someone outright? No, because yes, indeed, you may be taking away, potentially in the future, years and years of life that they could still have, like, they could still do meaningful things in. Nobody would deny that. But the danger here is that by treating somehow imprisonment as being a revocable punishment, something that you can take back, that therefore it's nicer. No, it's not nicer than the death penalty. At the point at which you die, you lose, as well as any other time you might have had in the future if you hadn't died. You also lose all the time you had leading up. You don't take your memory with you, right? We know it's in your brain. Your brain goes, your memory goes. It's as if you were never there, as far as you're concerned. When we're talking about questions of life and death, time does not particularly matter. It's sort of trivial. It's like, well, we let this person out before their time ran out, therefore they have more time. Okay. Does that mean, therefore, we've given them back their life? No, their life is still gone. You have executed them for however much time you kept them in jail. And the reason why it's important to note that is because keeping them in jail is not humane. It is an extraordinarily cruel thing to do to a human being. People will often choose to die rather than suffer the social death that occurs from being locked away forever, from having to watch everyone they care about move on and replace them and forget, only to be let out with almost nothing left. Not to mention a record that makes them pariah for the rest of their existence. Like, it's not nice. And we need to stop talking about it like it's nice. Again, I'm not pro-death penalty. I think the proceduralization of execution is horrific. I am actually adamantly against the death penalty. My position is a little bit more nuanced than that. I am against the use of imprisonment as a humane alternative to the death penalty. There are cases where the death penalty is the more humane choice. Which is not, to be clear, and we have to be really careful here, is not advocacy for the death penalty. You can take that polemically. This is how bad imprisonment is. You better be really careful with what you're doing with this, because this is worse than killing someone on many cases.
Similar, but you can't give them the entirety of their existence back. And so I would say it as an infinite amount of debt that is owed by the individual who commits murder to the party that is victimized. And as such, an infinite debt must be paid with an infinite price, and that would be the life of the party who commits the crime. Now, the only reason I'm against death in this respect, capital punishment, is because of erroneous conviction. I see life without parole as essentially a stopgap to prevent individuals from being falsely convicted and then killed before the real perpetrator is then brought to justice, or a false conviction can be overturned.
Yeah, you see the insane cruel optimism of this. Or not cruel optimism, what is it? It's like a cruel surrogate for mercy or compassion or humility. It's like, we're going to keep you alive in misery and torments with no hope, as everything that you hold dear in this life, everything that makes you cling to life, except for maybe the fear of dying or whatever, or the difficulty of attaining that, we're going to disintegrate all of that, but we're going to do so in the vague conjecture that maybe someday some new information will come to light that will allow you to leave the box to live out the rest of your miserable days alone as a pariah, as a clerk or something somewhere. Like, you see how despicable this actually is. Like, this is actually evil. Because keep in mind too, right? Lewis wants people in jail as retribution. He wants that to happen to them. But, you know, he's kind of okay absorbing the risk of doing that to the wrong people, of doing something worse than death to the wrong people. But he suddenly gets squeamish when someone has to push a button and turn the lights off. It's actually really sick. And the answer, and the solution is not to say, oh, we should just kill them. No. I don't know what the solution is necessarily, but like this reasoning is just actually sick.
I think that is the only thing that would stop me from being pro-capital punishment. Why do I have problems with parole? So parole or rehabilitation in general implies the possibility of forgiveness without necessarily taking into consideration whether the individual should be forgiven or not. An individual should be punished for the crime that they've committed and then atone for that crime with the punishment. That's essentially it. So if they've committed a crime, the punishment is atonement and essentially settles the debt between the parties. It essentially allows for equality to be restored between two individual parties within a justice system. And that is essentially why, you know, Lady Justice holds a sword in one hand and a scale in another. In relation to rehabilitation and how it can be beneficial for, you know, non-murderous criminals.
See, liberalism is not nice, guys. Liberalism is a one of the harshest state. Well, I guess it's the state's liberal, so it's always going to be a state logic. But it's one of the harshest logical systems imaginable. It really and truly is. We have squeamishness about bodily fluids being removed, but this is like peak cruelty. This spares nothing.
That's absolutely fine. I mean, I wouldn't call it rehabilitation. I think we should educate people and allow them to make their own choices. I think that the movement towards rehabilitation in our state today is usually the propagation of psychological manipulation evoked from notions of determinism and egoism, which are built upon liberalism. I think liberalism lends itself to rehabilitation, which actually just produces docile bodies of individuals who follow laws, who commit good behavior. In other words, don't prevent the functioning of the state and the accumulation of capital, whilst allowing for a certain...
He's a fascist! He's a fucking fascist! Oh my god. Lewis, you gotta read more about Hegel and less just Hegel's philosophy of right, okay? There is a reason why. Oh my god, that's actually just so funny. Oh. I wonder if Chad's gonna cotton on to that. That's just... Oh. I'm so glad I chose to watch this. Okay, so by the way, I'm not going to get into fascism and Hegel, but like, just there's a link there. Okay, we'll keep going.
Certain class of individuals to reap the rewards, whilst not considering the victims of crimes. And so the only reason that we should punish, and the only time punishment is appropriate, is in relation to the crime that is committed. We do not punish people because they are a risk to public safety. We punish them to right the wrong that was done on the crime. Punishing people to undo public safety,
Exactly, Titan. My mod Titan is absolutely right. Why haven't you liked the stream yet?
Facilitate public safety, I see as wholeheartedly unjust. If you punish people for crimes they have not committed, that is absolutely unethical, and I see it as conceited. You are essentially using the other individual as a means to an end in order to facilitate some sort of societal goal. So, 1 second. Okay.
What is retribution then? Justice would be a societal goal, no? I don't know.
Sorry, so someone was waving at us. So Yeah, and on top of that, I would say that there is a separation, which we can get into, between murder and manslaughter, which is obviously within UK terms. And I think that that needs to be obviously made clear. Not all homicide should be given life without parole. And with that, there we go.
All right, thank you so much, Lewis. All right, I didn't want to cut you.
All right, how long did that take us to get through? I've been cutting that like crazy. Let's see. Oh my god, we've been going for an hour. All right. Well, I guess we had the music running for a bit, but whatever.
Off, and so I actually let you go for that was about 7 minutes.
Oh my god,
So
sorry.
No,
Sorry.
it's okay. I didn't want to. You want to roll?
See,
you
he's
wanna
actually
talk,
a
right?
fascist,
So
stealing
in the interest
time.
of fairness, we will also give Chad 7 minutes for his opening statement as well. So, Chad, take it away. Oh,
We can't hear you, man.
Oh, you muted.
Sorry.
Okay. Yep, there you go.
Yeah. So broadly, I see the purpose of. I think prison can be evaluated. The prison can be evaluated on roughly 4 different axes. So the function of prison, right? So one is roughly what Lewis made the case for, which is retribution. So this is in essence punishment for its own sake. Secondly, there's rehabilitation. So this is taking someone who does not currently have the means of participating in society and giving them the means to do so. Second is incapacitation. So this is taking someone who poses a danger to the community and preventing them from causing further harm. And the last is deterrence. So this is preventing other people from committing crimes in the future. Right? In my view, these are the sort of, to varying extents, different penal systems, serve these 4 goals. So the question is, how does life without parole fare? Well, so on the last 3, it's an utter failure. Rehabilitation, clearly, it doesn't accomplish because the idea is that we're never letting anyone out of prison. As far as incapacitation goes, it's a failure there as well. So life sentences. Generally speaking, people tend to age out of crime, which means that as they get older, they're less likely to commit crimes. So, for example, I think the peak age for committing murder is 20 years old. By the time you hit 30, the risk is halved. By the time you hit 40, it's halved.
This is a good point. So one of the issues I have with life without parole is that a lot changes over the span of 20 years, or 10 years even, or 5 years even. You're not punishing the same person at that stage. The thing about the death penalty is, at the very least, one of its only merits is you can say that the person you are killing, insofar as you have ascertained that person is a murderer, right? From a retributive standpoint. That's not my stance. 20 years in the future, you've got or 30, 40 years in the future, you've got a much older man who may be a completely different creature. And we know this on an almost individual basis. Like, how many children have sat in their backyards picking apart insects, like for the sheer enjoyment of it, or burning ants with a magnifying glass? And then they learn, they change, and they mature over time, and they become horrified by that kind of thing. Not all of them do, but some of them do. A lot of them do. I think most of us do. At the very least, we learn that we shouldn't be just doing that wantonly, or for fun or whatever. Like, you shouldn't be like destroying animals for no reason. I know I've opened the floodgates for the vegans to come in, but like, people change substantially over a few years. I mean, same goes for somebody who commits a crime because they thought they had no other choice, or maybe in some instances they didn't have any other choice at one point, and then is still being punished for something that, for all intents and purposes, another person did in some distant past, maybe one they can scarcely remember. It's, at a certain point, it's like, what are we doing? Who are we punishing at this stage? And there are absolutely exceptions. Like, there are people who remain, we'll use this term loosely, but who remain evil, so to speak. for an extended period of time after the crime for which they are in prison takes place. And maybe there's some justice in continuing to keep that person in a box, maybe, whatever that means. I don't know why on earth you wouldn't consider it to be a net positive in that case, simply to terminate the ongoing accrual of more and more evil in the world, however contained it is. But in most cases, I would conjecture that the vast majority of people, after a few decades in prison, are maybe not for the better. And this is an additional reason why I don't think prison is a good thing. If it's making people worse, that's certainly bad. But maybe it's just boring, and maybe they, for whatever reason, are being, their environment just pacifies them, or just allows them to exist more or less peacefully, and they just grow in a boring, sedentary way, and eventually they're not the same person anymore. Like, I would conjecture that the vast majority of people are unrecognizable after, frankly, not very long. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but what about psychopathic serial killers? These are people who, no matter the punishment, never learns. Maybe life without parole is absolutely justified for these cases. I mean, maybe. Potentially, yeah. There are definitely edge cases, but, or I guess the word isn't edge cases, but there are definitely, like, extreme cases where, like, you can see that person meriting suffering. But then, like, my question to you is, so what? If their existence simply amounts to a growing pile of suffering, merited or not, what's the point? Just turn it off. How is that better? Furthermore, like, what is it doing to us who are doing that, right? Like doing cruel things hurts us, both at an institutional level, if we proceduralize and sort of numb ourselves to horrific cruelties that we are inflicting on people, and on a personal level, if we're not doing that. Like, I just don't see the point, insofar as we're talking about people who we will never let out into the general public again, who we believe are so evil that we cannot even morally justify allowing them to exist on some desert island somewhere. Why keep them alive? What's the point? Why do you specifically need them to suffer so much? Just turn it off. You're allowing more evil in the world to fester. It's like keeping a cancer alive just to spite it. Like, what the hell?
Again, even chronic offenders don't tend to commit crimes past their late 30s. And so in that sense, the amount of public safety that you gain with each additional year of incarceration diminishes, while the cost of doing so increases. So as people get older, as they age, it's increasingly costly to care for them. And this is true in not just in general. It's in general more costly to give care to elderly people, but particularly in prison, because it's such a stressful environment, and because the people coming into prison are generally in poor health to begin with. And so the result is that when you commit to imprisoning someone for life, that's $1 million investment up front that you're committing to incarcerate someone for the rest of their lives. And I'm not a deficit hawk, right? But these dollars do come with an opportunity cost, namely that they could be put to much better use, through evidence-backed ways to prevent future victims from occurring, right? So
I like where his head's at, but the fact is they wouldn't be. So maybe that's just me being pessimistic, but
every dollar that's spent here is a dollar that's not spent preventing future victims. At the end of all of this, right? So it fails. Oh, and it also fails in deterrence. I missed that. So generally speaking, the consensus is that long sentences don't affect don't help with deterrence. What matters is certainty of punishment, not the length of the sentence, right? So some small sentences have some marginal effect, but large sentences, don't really matter so much. Which makes sense. You put yourself in the mindset of a criminal, generally not considering the probability that you get caught. Often people who commit crimes are very frequently are inebriated, or not in a totally rational state of mind. And so generally people aren't thinking, well, I'd kill this person if the sentence were 20 years, but not if it were 25 or not.
Yeah, the question is not deterrence. It is never deterrence. Why? Because if the question had anything to do whatsoever with the deterrent value of capital punishment, we wouldn't be talking about life imprisonment. We would be talking about things that scare people, which has been done. Code of Hammurabi had human flaying, right? We would be talking about things that people will not risk. People will risk the possibility of life imprisonment without parole. People will risk the possibility of death. People, of course, will also risk the possibility of being flayed alive, as of course happened under the Code of Hammurabi. But the point is, like, we are not talking about. It's like nuclear deterrence, right? Like, people were justly, I think, and not necessarily because this is like the morally right thing, but people were justly annoyed at Jeremy Corbyn when he was asked, "You're facing nuclear war, right?" And the submarines, they open up the note they open up the capsule with the instructions. What do we do? Nuclear weapons have been fired at the UK. What do we do? And he refused to answer the only correct answer in that case. And it's the most immoral one imaginable, and it's the one you have to make if you're going to play the deterrence game. Jeremy Corbyn said, "I'll expect them to follow their instructions." He dodged the question. He wouldn't answer. Why? Because he would not say what would have to be on those instructions. What he should have said would be on those instructions, even if they weren't, crucially. It would have been better for him to say this, and for the instructions to say, "Let the UK die, it's not worth the cost of firing back." But he should have said this to the public and to the world. When the submarine operators open up those instructions, it will say, "Bathe them in fire." Why? Because the deterrence game relies on every other state with nuclear weapons thinking that that's the truth so that they don't fire first. It's played in advance of anything being shot. As soon as there's missiles in the air, it doesn't matter, of course, right? Like, it really wouldn't matter. At that point, it's like they're opening the instructions that says, "Fire back." So what? You're gone. Like, literally, just choose not to fire the missiles at that stage if you're on that submarine, because you're saving nothing. You're just accruing more and more suffering from innocent people elsewhere for no reason. But up until that point, you need to really sell that you are going to destroy the world if that takes place. And if you're unwilling to do that, forget it, because you're not deterring anybody. Similarly with this, if we're like, we can't waffle between like sort of a nice humane, liberal idea of, "We're not going to kill you, don't worry, we're just going to put you in a box for the rest of your life. Maybe you'll get out." Like no. If your aim is to deter people, you scare them. That is the point. That is the logic. The question is not about deterrence here. Is the point I'm making.
Or I'd kill this person if I get parole. If it's possible that if I get caught, I'd get parole. Certainly not what people think. What matters is the certainty of getting caught, right? So it leaves us with retribution, which is basically, sort of what Lewis laid out here. And to me, I don't see, I don't see a good reason to punish someone if that punishment doesn't do anything. If it doesn't improve people's lives, I think we should evaluate life without parole like we would any other public policy, right? When we're looking at public policy, we're looking at how can we use government funds to improve people's lives. And in this case, it's not clear to me how it improves people's lives. People will cite cite victims. The reality is it's really not clear the extent to which, long sentence lengths really improve victim well-being. I mean, you can look sort of across countries. It's not clear that, in countries like Norway, which even go much farther than abolishing life without parole, but indeed abolish life sentences entirely, victim, certainly trust in the justice system is higher there than in the United States. Not clear that victim well-being is improved by this. And
I will say this. I have in close proximity, at least in my personal history, someone who was brutally murdered. And I'm aware of the person who did it, who is in prison currently. And they have yearly parole meetings, or parole hearings, where they can make a bid to be let out. And when those parole hearings take place, my blood pressure shoots up. I can't imagine what the family experiences when that happens, but there is an effect on somebody when that takes place. So that is not unreal. Um, we may be unable to find this on like scientifically, but from experience, as many people can attest from their own experience, there is definitely the possibility of very serious repercussions for this, and we can't be blinkered by the fact that we can't like perfectly chart this, right? Again, this is one of the problems with proceduralization, is we lose contact with a lot of stuff that is very real, but is very difficult to reduce to like a simple ratio.
More to the point, those dollars that we're spending, functionally using prisons as nursing homes, could be used to, provide restitution, provide counseling, provide these things, which don't fill the hole, right? Nothing can make them whole, including a long sentence. What people need, right? To the extent that these people are indebted, what these people need isn't for the offender to serve, to spend their twilight years, in prison, being abused by guards and prisoners and these sorts of things. What these people need, I mean, to the extent that we can make them whole, even partially, are the things that I mentioned. Compensating them for the lack of income from their loved one, providing counseling, these sorts of things. At the end of the day, it's not surprising, I don't think.
I'm in agreement with him to a point. Having the person alive and suffering for eternity, or at least for the rest of their lives, that will not bring any peace to the families of the victims. I mean, it might actually. I probably shouldn't assume that way. There are probably people who would absolutely find some peace of mind knowing that somebody who killed their loved one is never going to see the outside of a wall again. But I think that justice actually does matter. And crucially, we don't live in a world that is accommodating towards attaining justice without being extraordinarily destructive of other things that we cannot afford to break. But an acknowledgement of the cost is extraordinarily important. And I think that we do a lot of damage when we consider the destruction of the lives of one of our own as being something that can be mitigated just by therapy, as if that was simply like a scab you need to learn to stop picking at. That reduces our value to nothing, and that can't be the response. It can't be the sole response. And maybe it's the only response we can make practically, but then we need to be able to make the acknowledgement that we're doing this for pragmatic reasons and that we have a duty to something a lot harsher than what we're doing, that we are flouting to sustain things that we care more about. And that's respectable. That's honest. That's actually that's bringing in the stuff that actually matters and giving it its due, even if only by acknowledging that we aren't giving it its due. It's something. This idea that people just need to basically be treated out of their loss, I think is horrific in and of itself.
That, for example, the European Court of Human Rights ruled life without parole as a violation of people's human rights, concluding that prisoners have a right to hope. The ICC, this is the International Criminal Court, the body that tries people for...
Wig asks, how would you feel about just leaving the decision to the victims if present? I don't like that either, because, just because somebody is a victim or a family of a victim, and we're always talking about family of the victim in the case of murder, doesn't mean that their preferred response to a crime is going to be a good one, or a just one, or a non-catastrophically destructive one. I would tend towards, as a personal stance, forgiveness towards the family member of a victim of murder who commits murder to avenge that death. I would be more lenient towards that person than I would be to the murderer if he had been caught, or if they had been caught rather. But I don't think that's very wise. I think that would leave a lot of room for some really negative things.
genocide and war crimes doesn't use life without parole. Most European countries don't use life without parole. The UK is one exception. Most Latin American countries don't use life without parole. It's a pretty rare sentence. And the reason being is at the end of the day, it's a poor use of public funds, and there's an opportunity cost there's an opportunity cost for each of those dollars that we're spending doing this. Moreover, and maybe Lewis will accuse us of conflating application with sort of the theory of the law, but I don't think the application and the law are separable. There's the idea that long sentences, life without parole included, put an upward pressure on other sentence lengths. So, for example, to quote the American Law Institute, they argue in essence that the most severe penalty in a criminal sentencing system serves as an anchor point, which defines the scale of the penalties beneath it. Right. So the idea is that sentences here are generally proportional, and so the most extreme sentence is life without parole. Then this inflates the other sentences as well, right? And you can say, well, in principle, we couldn't do that. This is how it happens. And so, to quote from them directly, the entire scale of authorized sanctions has some tendency to be stretched upward or compressed downward, depending on the absolute maximum is located. So not only do life sentences not serve to rehabilitate, the people who've committed crimes, but do these serious crimes, but they also don't. They also actively harm rehabilitation efforts for other crimes by driving mass incarceration. And again, of course, as Lewis said, he wants to sort of sidestep the racism issue, which is that these sentences are disproportionately the brunt of these sentences is disproportionately bore by people of color in the United States. And again, you can say, well, we just do away with racism. But at the end of the day, right, our institutions are imperfect, no matter what. You can talk about the philosophy of law all you want, right? At the end of the day, when we actually put these institutions in practice, they're imperfect. And so, given that that's the case, given that there are going to be people for whom, we do sentence to life without parole, there are going to be people always who are fucked over by those. And so we should limit. And so in essence, we should limit the state's power to fuck them over in that way. By denying them the ability to sentence someone to giving someone a life sentence without parole. Lewis mentioned, actually, I'll wait.
I was going to say, we just passed 7 minutes. If you want to finish that up.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, so at the end of the day, prisons aren't equipped to be nursing homes, and we shouldn't make them be, right? There's little reason to deny people the possibility of parole, other than punishment for punishment's sake.
I don't like this characterization of prisons as nursing homes. I get where he's going with this. It's like, oh, it's going to get so expensive. We're just taking care of these elderly people who have no risk of recommitting crimes, yada, yada, yada. Again, I am not for retributive prison. I'm actually not for retributive justice generally, because I don't think the state is really equipped to dole it out effectively. And people do, in fact, change. And I don't think changed people should be punished as if they're unchanged. If anything, maybe on some cosmic level the guilt remains, but it just seems like a waste. Not to mention, if you're also killing something intrinsically good if they've been changed for the better, no? That seems intuitive to me, at least. We could probably spend a lot of time talking about that, but it can't just be a question of, is it expensive and kind of silly that we're keeping people in here? These questions are more serious than that. They really are, and I don't like this aloofness to, the gravity of what's going on. I don't like Lewis's response either. It's cheap in a different way. It decides that, well, we're just going to sort of, bluntly regard people who do this particular thing as meriting eternal torment, or the closest approximation thereto. And we are just going to make them suffer endlessly just because we have red-lettered that particular thing, ignoring the fact that we are only doing that to a specific subset of people who are actually doing that thing, but in such a way that we can, it makes us squeamish, rather. Because when we hear about somebody embezzling money or somebody engaging in some kind of unethical practice or whatever, we tend to think of those people as not being monsters. And I suspect the reason why is because in their place, a lot of us would do exactly the same thing. very few of us find it easy to conceive of going out and physically destroying somebody else's body. But yeah, that was a great place for that laugh, I know. But what I was laughing at was we're being simultaneously like hyper like Old Testament towards, you know, like obvious cases of one person kills another person out of rage or hate or some kind of perverse fetish for death or whatever. But we are just allowing people whose actions have the same result, who know their actions have the same result, we're allowing them to fly under the radar willfully. It's difficult to even talk about this because there's no shared universe between these interlocutors, right? Like we're operating in completely different spaces. Like Lewis is going to go on about justice and about like the gravity of putting a cessation to all of the potentialities of a person's life and all of their will and all that sort of thing. Those things are very important. But he's not going to pay attention at all to questions of like, well, people change over time. We should be punishing the guilty, not somebody who simply bears a similar history with the guilty, which is what happens when you have somebody who changes radically after a span of like 20 years in prison, say, or 10 years in prison, or after rehabilitation or something like that. Like every cell in our body is recycled, what is it, like every 7 or so years? Like does the universe keep track of us? Do we have like an immortal soul that God is paying attention to and saying, nope, that's a red one. We've put a red check mark on that one. That one goes into the box. I don't know why I picked a red check mark for that, but it's like right off the bat, these people can't talk to each other. They have no shared commitments. Chad has zero interest whatsoever in justice. He has no conception of righting the wrong of somebody's will being eliminated and insulted and terminated, and the destruction of their family's well-being. He thinks this can all be cured by therapy. But on the flip side, perspective philosophy, like he's bringing in stuff that just doesn't do the work he wants it to do, and it's question begging besides. Like what? Their will, their moral sense, their aspiration, like all these things. These have no metaphysical existence that he's established, at least. What is he talking about? Like, this is a debate that can go nowhere, because this is... these people are in different dimensions.
Thank you so much, Chad. All right, now we're going to do, this is going to be the fun part. So we're going to throw it back to Lewis for a second, and I want you both try and take a little less than 3 minutes. You don't have to like qualify everything, but just make sure that we're on the same page. 3 minutes, define and steelman your opponent's position, and then at the end, I want the opposition, so in this case, like Chad, say whether you feel like that is an adequate representation of your beliefs. And if not, we'll have to do a little brief back and forth to make sure we're on the same page, just to make sure, again, that we're not strawmanning each other for the purpose of this conversation. We want to make sure this is as good as discourse as possible, even if it does get heated. I want to make sure that we all know what we're talking about. So, Lewis, 3 minutes. Describe Chad's position as charitably as possible. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So thanks for your exposition there. If I understand your position correctly, you're arguing that there are 4 types of justification for, or 4 types of reasons given for punishment or, penality. Those are retribution, rehabilitation, deterrence, and incapacitation. Thank you. So in that, you argued that you were saying that there was public safety as justification for incarceration. The um, the bringing back into the fold, if you will, of criminals who've committed crimes, allowing them to participate into society, rehabilitation, deterrence, preventing further crimes, and incapacitation, also preventing further crimes. You
I'm just going to
pointed
speed
towards
this up
the
a bit.
opportunity cost of sentencing with whole life sentences or life without parole as being pretty severe, costing up to $1 million, which could have otherwise been spent on victim restitution. You pointed towards the well-being of the criminals, perhaps being violated, even violating their human rights, as they may have a right to hope. And you also pointed towards it being the upward standard of sentencing from which all other sentences can be measured against, and ultimately causes an upward pressure, which leads to lengthier and more harsh sentences for pettier crimes.
Yep.
Right,
That's very good.
Okay. Excellent. All right, now Chad, you can do the same for Lewis.
Yeah. So basically, what I got from Lewis's opening statement was that he views he views sort of, first of all, the philosophy of law and the application of law are separate from one another. Let's discuss the former. So to the extent that racism plays a role in the application of life without parole is irrelevant to the debate. The debate what matters is we can just get rid of the racism and leave life without parole. The reason why he supports life without parole specifically for murders is murder is qualitatively different from other crimes. It causes an infinite harm to the victim itself. He didn't support the death penalty because of the possibility of erroneous conviction.
Sorry, so Ethan J says 7 years is a myth. Brain cells tend to persist lifelong. Most other cells are placed with highly varying frequency from a few days to a few decades in the case of T cells. Okay, fair enough, but nonetheless, we're talking about like the total displacement and reorganization of all these things over time, right? Like it's same difference. I don't see the point.
Is it out here? So why parole specifically is wrong is it implies the possibility of forgiveness, so that these people should, even quote, should be forgiven.
Is there anything you'd like to add or amend?
I mean, we can always get obviously go through it as we're backwards and forwards anyway. So yeah.
Was that adequate?
I'm gonna be honest with you. I'd rather not. How long have we been going for? We've been talking for so long. We're at an hour and a half. We have gotten 24 minutes into this.